Hi everyone, welcome back to Life Technologies YouTube channel and thank you for watching. So this is a continuation of our Huawei Lab simulation series, and in our episode 20 we'll be exploring how to implement interface-based DHCP on Huawei devices. So we know DHCP stands for Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol, and this is a very common networking protocol in the networking world. It's used almost in all service provider, in all enterprise networks, even home office networks. And it's commonly used to assign the parameters. For example, the IP address, the domain name, the gateway, the DNS IP. All these parameters can be assigned to networking devices, mainly the networking hosts, dynamically using DHCP. So if you are deploying a network and you have many devices, it will not make sense to start configuring these devices one by one. The workload will be too high, and it could even cause to some errors when you are doing manual configuration. So that's why we need to deploy DHCP in our network, so that all these parameters are assigned to the networking hosts dynamically. So it will improve the efficiency and reduce the workload of assigning these IP addresses, even managing these IP addresses. It's very easy when you are using DHCP, the Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. So in this lab, we'll be focusing on how to implement DHCP on Huawei devices. And some of the topic that we'll be covering will be, one, we need to create VLANs on the switches. Remember, many times, especially for enterprise home office networks, we segment the networks into VLANs. So we'll be seeing how you can create VLANs on Huawei switches. And then you need to define different types of ports or different types of links. For example, the access link, the trunk ports, trunk links, because when you are connected to the PC, normally we make it the access port. So you will see how to configure the access and trunk ports or access or the trunk links on switches. So on the switches, we'll be configuring the ports facing the PCs, the host, as access ports, and defining the default VLANs. As you can see, we have three VLANs. We have VLAN 100 with switch 1, PC1, PC2, and PC3. We have switch 200 with PC4, PC5, and PC6. The gate will be, we have switch 2 connecting them. Then we have VLAN 300 with PC7, 8, and 9, and switch 3. The interfaces between the switches, we normally configure them as trunk links or trunk ports. So we'll be configuring them as trunks and then passing the VLANs. Then on the router, we'll be configuring interface-based DHCP. So on the router, we'll define the three VLANs, the sub-interfaces, and then we'll configure the gateways and enable DHCP on these interfaces. So we have different IP address assigned for different VLANs. We have sales department, which is VLAN 100, will be using 192.168.0.0/24. So the PCs in these VLAN, the sales department, will be assigned IPs in that range, 192.168.0.0/24. And then we have finance department, will be using 192.168.200.0/24, and the marketing department, which is VLAN 100, will be using 192.168.100.0. So these are the details, and we'll be configuring everything step by step on the CLI. So to start with, we'll start by configuring the switches, the access switches. So as you can see, we have access switches, and then we have an aggregation switch, switch 4. So switch 4 connects to router 1. So to start with, we'll first configure switch 1. So on switch 1, so we have the setup ready in ENSP. So on switch 1, we know that we have different interface connections. We have interface connection to PC1, PC2, PC3, which I've mentioned that we'll be configuring as access. And then we have Ethernet 4, which is connecting to switch 4. So switch 4, Ethernet 4 will be configured as a trunk link or a trunk port. Then we'll configure 1, 2, and 3 as access ports and define VLAN 100 as the default. So the first thing that we'll do is to give this switch a name. So let me first undo the terminal monitor. So we'll give it a name. This is switch 1. And then we'll create VLAN. We just create VLAN 100. So we are just creating one VLAN. So you use the command VLAN and then the VLAN ID. Once we've created the VLAN, we can now start configuring the interfaces. So the first interface will be to PC1. Interface Ethernet 0/0/1. We need to define the port link type. When you check link type, it can either be access, .eq, tunnel, hybrid, or trunk. So this one is defined as an access port. So when you configure a port as an access, you need to define the default VLAN. So this is how you define a default VLAN, port default VLAN, and then it's 100. So I can just copy these configs. We use it on the other interfaces. So I will go into Ethernet 002. We do the same configuration. On interface Ethernet 0/0/3, we'll do the same. So we have, if I display VLAN 100, we should be having 3 ports. Ethernet 001, Ethernet 002, Ethernet 003. So now we need to configure the trunk. On the trunk, we also need to define the port link type. This should be 3. So we do port link type. It's trunk, and then we need to, let's check this one. So this one still have the configuration. No, this should be 003, 004. Interface Ethernet. /4, it's display this. Don't have it, so it's port link type trunk, and then port trunk. We need to define the allowed VLANs, allow pass VLAN. So this one is just VLAN 100. So if I display VLAN again, you can see that we now have 4 ports: Ethernet 001, Ethernet 002, Ethernet 003, and Ethernet 004. So we have finished all the configuration on switch 1. Remember, with this one, we'll just operate as a layer 2 switch. So on switch 2, we need to do the same. I will undo terminal monitor. I can clear the screen also. So system, we need to give it a name. This is switch 2. Let me move this one to the other side so that we see the interfaces. So we have 3 interfaces, 1, 2, 3, and 4 interconnecting the switches. So we'll start by configuring 001. Now we need to create the VLAN first. So we'll create the VLAN at the first step, VLAN 200, quit. Then we can start configuring our interfaces. Interface Ethernet 0/0/1. We define the port link type as access, and then we define the default VLAN, same way we've done on the other switch. The VLAN does not exist. It should be VLAN 200 for this case. You can see that if you don't create the VLAN, it will alert you that the VLAN does not exist. So it's always better you create the VLANs and then you can define them on the ports. So we are finished on port 1. I can just display current configuration, interface Ethernet 0/0/1, so that I pick these configs and use it on interface Ethernet 002. So we have this one, and we'll use similar configs on our Ethernet 002 and 003. Then we'll do on Ethernet 0/0/3. Best, good. So we have finished configuring the access links. We also need to configure the trunk. So the first step of configuring the trunk, of course, we need to define the port link type. So interface Ethernet 0/0/4 port link type. Let me just type it, port link type, trunk. Then we need to allow the VLAN port trunk, allow pass VLAN 200. So this is it for the configuration on switch 2. We'll move to switch 3. So on switch 3, we are doing the same. We need first to configure the sysname as switch 3. Once you've configured the sysname, we can create the VLAN 300. After configuring the VLAN 300, and now we can define the ports interface. Starting from Ethernet, I can do the terminal monitor again so that it doesn't disturb us, and do terminal monitor. Interface Ethernet 0/0/2. /0/2. We define the port link type as access. Then default VLAN should be 300. So I'll just undo terminal monitor again. So we've configured these two. We need to configure, let me pick the configuration, interface Ethernet 0/0/2. So we have the configs. We can now configure 0/0/3. Then 0/0/4. So we've finished configuring the access port. I can display VLAN 300. You can see we have 3 ports already. So now the next step will be to configure our trunk link between switch 3 and switch 4. So it's interface Ethernet 0/0/1 port link type as usual. Port link type trunk, then port trunk, allow pass VLAN 300. So we finished our configuration on switch 3. Can verify display VLAN. We have the 4 ports assigned to VLAN 300. The next step is now to configure our aggregation switch, which is switch 4. So on switch 4, we are defining all the ports as trunk links. Even the port connecting to the router should be defined as a trunk link, so it can pass all these VLANs towards the router. So I'll configure the switch name to switch 4, and I will create VLAN. So remember, on this switch, I need to create 3 VLANs, switch 100, 200, and 300. So we can use the VLAN batch command to create the 3 VLANs at once instead of creating it one by one. So you can use the command VLAN batch, and then you define the VLAN that you want to create, 100, 200, 300. That is it. And then we can define the port link types on the 4 ports. So we'll start with interface Ethernet 0/0/1. I will define the port link type to trunk, and then it's port trunk. We need to pass the VLAN, allow pass VLAN 100, 200, 300. I'll display this so that we can copy and use this configuration on the remaining ports, just to save on time. So on Ethernet 0/0/2, We paste the configs. Then we have interface Ethernet 0/0/3. We do the same. Then we have the port going to the router 0/0/1. We do the same. So we finished configuration on the switch 4, which is aggregation. So if you display switch 4, you can see the VLANs 100, 200, 300, and they are all bound to these ports. So the next step is now to configure the router. And on the router configuration, there are some few things you need to pay attention to. The first thing is defining the .eq termination VLAN. So after defining the .eq termination VLAN, you also need to enable the router, the sub interface, so that it can reply to the ARP. Remember, when we start DHCP on this PC, it will be using broadcast messages first to request for the IP. So for this router to reply to those broadcast messages, you need to enable ARP on that interface. So the first configuration that we need to do is on VLAN 100. So we'll create a sub interface Ethernet 0001.100, and then we can assign the parameter that we need for DHCP. So I will undo terminal monitor again. So and give it a name, which is R1. We go straight to creating the sub interface Ethernet 0/0/1.100. So I've mentioned we need to create the .eq termination, and then you need to give the VLAN ID of 100. Once you've given the VLAN ID of 100, the next step will be to enable ARP. But then I will not enable the ARP broadcast first, so that we can see the router. The PC will be sending broadcast messages, but the router will not be able to reply. We'll just be getting the ARP messages on the router when we do a packet capture. So the second step, of course, we need to assign an IP address on this interface. So we'll assign IP address 192.168.100.1. This is for VLAN marketing. Which one is marketing? So this one will be .100.1. Let me confirm that. Marketing is 100, so we'll do 100.1/24. Once we've assigned the IP address, we also need to configure this interface as the DHCP interface. So you need to use this command, DHCP select interface. So we need to first enable DHCP in the global. So you just need to do DHCP enable command. That is it. We go back to our interface Ethernet 0/0/1.100. We can now enable DHCP select interface. So we have enabled DHCP globally and on the interface. So after you've enabled DHCP, you can configure other parameters. For example, we can configure the domain name. So we can give the domain name DHCP server, then we can configure the domain name to be livefeed.com. We can also configure the DNS parameters. So you can use DHCP DNS list, DHCP server, then DNS. DNS list will use Google IP. You can configure the list time. For example, if you check, you have so many parameters. Let me just DHCP server, and then you can also configure the list. I need the server command, not select. So you can configure the NBNS list. So let's configure the list. How long do you want this IP to be listed to the PC? So you can make it maybe days, you want weeks, or you just want for few hours. Then once this lease expires, the IP will be taken back and the PC has to request again another IP. So you can configure, maybe let me say day, you just want it to be assigned for 1 day. You can configure the hour or anything much more detailed based on your company requirement. So we've configured the .eq termination, we've configured the IP address, we've configured DHCP select interface. So the next step will now to capture packets and to enable DHCP on the PC. So I will start packet capture. And I only want to capture DHCP messages. So I will do DHCP, only DHCP. It's not taking effect yet. So yes, now we are filtering only DHCP messages. So on the PC, we can now set it to DHCP from static so that it can obtain all the IP address, the subnet, the gateway, DNS. All these will be assigned to the PC dynamically using DHCP, Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. So once we've set up these, you can see that we're expecting DHCP messages to start coming in on the PC, on the router. So we wait for some few minutes. Let's see this. Verify display VLAN. On Android, it's up. Oh no, I've configured on a wrong interface. On the PC, I've configured on the wrong interface. You can see this one is gig 00, so I need to change the interface configured on this router. To display this, I will undo DHCP select, select interface, display this. I can undo interface. So when you are configuring these things, you really need to be able to troubleshoot quickly and identify where you are facing issues. I quit again, undo interface, Ethernet 0/0/1.100. That's why we are not able to get the messages. So we can configure now the right interface, gig 0/0/1 dot, just confirm it's 1, that is 0.100. Then I will copy this configuration, the DHCP configurations, and paste. So we expect to start getting DHCP messages. Why I still again configured copied with the sub interface. Yeah, so it's interface Ethernet 0/0/0/1.100. We'll undo DHCP select interface. Then I'll quit and undo interface. Ethernet 0/0/1.100. So we've removed that. So on the interface gig 0/0/0.100, we now need to configure only these parameters. I copied the sub interface also. So we can paste this on. That is should be on the right interface. Display these. Have the interface, it's up, VLAN ID 100. We expect the PC to be sending the ARP messages. Let me recheck. Apply. So you can see the ARP messages are coming. Oh, I have already configured the ARP, and then DHCP enable ARP reply. Let's see. So you can see that now we have DHCP offer, DHCP discover messages being sent from the PC to the router, and then we have offer, and then we have request, and then we have acknowledgement. So the request, of course, the PC is confirming that yes, I can use this IP as my IP, then the router has to acknowledge. So these are the 4 messages that are used in DHCP. Of course, you need to understand, to have a better understanding of these messages, because it helps you to understand how DHCP is working. So you can see the different parameters that are exchanged when we are exchanging these messages between the server and the client. In this sense, the server is the router, and then we have the client, because DHCP uses the server client mode. So the client will discover, like it will request an IP, it will broadcast that messages. If you see the request, if you see the discover, it's being sent to a broadcast IP. Then we have the reply from the PC with a unicast IP. The destination is now the IP that it has offered the PC. So that communication between the server and the client, you need to understand it. And a better way of understanding is it's by using the packet capture. From these packets, you can see all the details that are being sent between the client and the server. So another thing, if also PC2 can also use DHCP, we can do the same. So on PC, after I've enabled that, we also expect messages coming in from PC2. You need to apply. I've applied DHCP on PC2. So when we check on PC1, let me go to PC1. PC1, you will have to, if I do IP config, you can see that we have this IP assigned, we have the mask and the gateway. So all these, and even the DNS server, all these information have been assigned from the DHCP server, which is now managing the DHCP, the assignment of these parameters to the host machines. So I can display IP pool, IP pool interface. You need to give the interface name. Of course, we have used this interface gig. Interface should be the gig. You can see we have used the pool name. So the pool name will be the gig Ethernet 000. No conflicts have been detected. We have used 2 IPs. None has expired. You can see the parameter that we have configured, the gateway. So all these can be, you can see all this information on the router. So you can see that PC2 has also sent similar messages: discover, offer, request, acknowledgement. And in this offer, you can see the IP that is being given or assigned to PC2, 100.3. So we can do similar configuration for VLAN 200. So if we go to PC4 and try to enable DHCP, remember PC4 is in VLAN 200 and we haven't configured the gateway for VLAN 200. So we'll not be able to get those messages because yes, there is no communication, there is no gateway, there is no VLAN configured on the router for 200. So this one I will use 200 is finance it is 192.168.200.100. So what I can do is I can copy the configuration that I have on my slide for 200. Where is 200? This is VLAN 200, so I will just edit this to VLAN 200, and then the IP address that we are using is 200.100. I will confirm this IP. Display current configuration interface gig 0/0/0.100. These are the, so I can just configure it manually 0/0/0.200. I'll give the IP address of 192.168.200.1. mask is 24, and then the other parameters I can just copy. I need to configure the .tk also termination of 200, VLAN ID of 200. Copy and paste. So we have the configurations ready. We can do similar configuration for our sales department. VLAN 300. .300, I'll do .eq VLAN termination, VID 300. IP address, it's 192.168.0.1, mask is 24. The other configurations remain the same. The DHCP server, the DNS remain the same. So on PC2, PC4, I can now check whether we are able to get the IP address. So on PC4, if I do, I'll go to the command ipconfig. We are able to get IP from the block that is specified, 192.168.200.254. Similarly, on PC8, if I can do the same, I can enable DHCP on this PC, apply, and then check the IP config. We have an IP address in this range. So DHCP is working okay for all these VLANs in different departments. So on router, the final thing that we can confirm is display IP pool again. We should be having 3 pools, and we can see the details of which IPs are used, which IPs are conflicting, which IPs are idle, how many have expired, how many in total. You can see in total we have 759. We have only used 4 IP address. So if I go to PC7 and enable DHCP, of course, 1 more IP will be used. So we expect to have 5 IPs used. I will run the same command. You can see now we have used 4 IPs, 5 IPs. And all these pools, you can get the detailed information, the ones that are used, which one are assigned. So it's very easy to manage IP address assignment and even assigning all these parameters using DHCP compared to when you are doing it manually. So this is it, guys. Thank you for watching, and please remember to subscribe to our channel, to comment, and to like our videos. Please stay tuned for more upcoming videos on our channel. Thank you.